You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
This episode of Mission Log is sponsored by ExpressVPN. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/missionlog. That's expressvpn.com/missionlog, and you can get an extra 3 months free. expressvpn.com/missionlog.
Got Slack? Got Macs? Get Collide, device security that fixes challenging problems by messaging your users on Slack. You can try Collide with all its features on an unlimited number of devices for free for 14 days, no credit card required. Try it out at collide.com/missionlog. That's KOLIDE.com/missionlog.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 445. Prime Factors.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Norman Lau.
And I'm John Champion. Each week on Mission Log, we explore an episode of Star Trek for the potential trade value of that story, examining it for morals, meanings, and messages, and seeing if it withstands the test of time.
This week, Prime Factors, the one where Captain Janeway and the crew of Voyager experience the Delta Quadrant's idea of SANS, as it redefines the old adage, if it's too good to be true, then Tuvok will decide that for you.
We'll get back to Prime Factors in a moment, right after Norman tells all of you how you can stay in touch with all of us.
Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com and join us on Twitter and Facebook at MissionLogPod. While you're at it, leave us a review and rating at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. And please remember, your comments could be used on Mission Log or Engage on the Roddenberry YouTube channel. And now, here is John Champion with the trivia that he knows will bring you pleasure.
Well, I certainly hope it will. Trivia for Prime Factors. We have a story by David R. George III and Eric Stillwell. Now, Eric's name should be familiar. He, of course, has a story credit for the very well-regarded TNG episode Yesterday's Enterprise. He also served many production roles going back to TNG's earliest days, starting out as a lowly PA and working his way up. David is best known as a Star Trek novelist, as well as a contributor to Star Trek Magazine and other sci-fi publications. He and Eric had this idea for a run-in the Voyager would have with a tie-in to a TOS favorite, that being Gary 7. Well, not Gary himself, but the alien species that had some cool technology like a transporter-type device that could get him and presumably others to travel vast distances. They made the pitch, and many of those elements that they had made it into the final script, but obviously that very specific tie-in was lost along the way. The final teleplay credit goes to Michael Perricone and Greg Elliott. As writers, they are most often credited together. A few of their other credits include shows like Savannah and Charmed. On his own, though, Michael has a very robust career in audio engineering and as a sound supervisor for a number of projects, large and small. They have just 2 total Star Trek credits together as writers, this one and an upcoming 4th season episode of Voyager. This was directed by Les Landau. Not surprising to see Les here after his long run as a director on TNG and DS9. We most recently covered his work on Voyager with Time and Again. Time for our cast spotlight and, well, wrapping up our main cast spotlight with Garrett Wang as Ensign Harry Kim. Garrett was born in Riverside, California, but spent his earliest years in Bermuda. A move to Tennessee followed, and finally he found himself back in California to attend UCLA, where he was encouraged to pursue acting. A handful of early TV and commercial work landed him almost immediately in front of casting for Voyager, and he found himself a series regular nearly at the beginning of his career. After Voyager, Garrett has bounced around from video games and TV and feature appearances, but it should be no surprise to listeners of this show that Garrett is indeed a Star Trek and sci-fi fan and has made himself a fixture in those worlds. He leads the Star Trek programming track at DragonCon in Atlanta. He's a fixture at other conventions and Trek events, and you can easily find him and his takes on Voyager with co-star Robert Duncan McNeil on the Delta Flyers podcast. Now let's look at our guest cast. On Voyager, welcome back to Martha Hackett as Seska and Josh Clark as Lieutenant Carey. And then on Sikaris, let's meet a few of the locals. Jarrett O'Tell is played by Andrew Hill Newman, and while that may not be a household name like some other actors, Andrew has had a thriving career in entertainment since the 80s. In addition to numerous TV and film credits, everything from Mannequin to Night Court to Desperate Housewives, you can find Andrew's name in credits for many shows as both a producer and writer. He has scribed many shows on Nickelodeon, co-created the Celebrity Poker Showdown, and even contributed material to Saturday Night Live. On top of all that, Andrew has had a performing career on stage in Broadway productions of Little Shop of Horrors, Merlin, and Big River, to name a few. Now, Harry Kim is smitten by Udana, played by Yvonne Suhor. She's from New Orleans, and like Andrew, who we just mentioned, had a career on stage in addition to TV and film roles. In the early 90s, she was a regular on ABC's The Young Riders about the Pony Express and had standout guest roles on shows like Northern Exposure and Brooklyn Bridge. Sadly, we lost Yvonne at the age of 56 in 2018. Finally, Gatherell is played by Belgian-born Ronald Gutman, another actor with a long career on both stage and screen. Ronald got his start on TV in the mid-'70s. As that work took him from Europe to Hollywood, he had a memorable role in the 1989 film The Hunt for Red October as the unflappable engineer, Lieutenant Melican. He has continued almost non-stop in TV and film, everything from comedy to soap operas, and most recently a recurring role in the Forrest Whitaker-led Epics series, Godfather of Harlem.
Sit right back and you will hear a tale. A lot of tales if you're lucky, and maybe they'll bring you pleasure. Let's start with this one.
Prologue. Mealtime in the mess hall. Harry Kim is taking a ribbing from the next table over, where Seska and B'Elanna are prying into his love life, or lack thereof, with one of the Delaney sisters. Seems a romantic gondola ride on the holodeck ended up with Harry in the drink. Captain Janeway looks on to the merriment, pleased that her crew are getting along personally. Tuvok can only muster that he thinks the camaraderie will improve efficiency. But their conversation is interrupted by a call from the bridge that they've picked up a distress call, and a weird one it is. It's not the alien ship that's in distress, but rather its captain states that Voyager is in distress. Act 1. This is the welcome wagon from the planet Sikaris. It's a man named Gatherell Laban, and he invites himself onto Voyager for hors d'oeuvres. Yes, the people of Sikaris are well known for their extreme hospitality, and he's there to invite the crew over for some R&R. Neelix is excited about exotic plants. Janeway is excited about a break for her crew. It's all good. Even Tuvok likes the idea, since a relaxed crew is an efficient crew, right? Some of the officers start checking out this incredibly hospitable planet, full of pleasant people and modern but bland and forgettable architecture. Harry Kim meets a young woman who is operating a weather sensor, and she definitely takes an interest in him with his unbounded nerdiness. Janeway finds herself in full-on Dr. Crusher at Farpoint Station mode, going ham on some bolts of fabric. Gatherell, he's just Gath now, offers anything she wants. They can make clothes out of all of this cloth for free because she's a guest, and his people are just like that. Janeway is delighted but professional, ready to authorize shore leave for her entire crew. Gath is pleased to know that they'll all soon be able to visit, and he also seems a bit personally interested in Janeway's experience on Sikaris. Act 2. More of the crew have beamed down to Sikaris. Harry Kim, in a way more relaxed, romantic mood, has found his way back to the woman he met before, Udana. She's rapt with the story he tells about how Voyager found itself in the Delta Quadrant, and she even asked permission to share it with others. Stories have value. They affect lives, and she wants to hear more. But this time in a more private place. Udana takes Harry to a kind of transporter pad. They materialize just before sunrise in the woods of Alastria, a place with warm, passion winds that induce a kind of euphoria. The feeling overwhelms them both, and Harry wants to know more clearly where they are. This place has 2 suns, where Sikaris only has 1. She explains that Alastria is far away, about 40,000 light-years from Sikaris. Romance Harry gives way again to Nerd Harry, and he insists that he needs to know everything there is to know about that transporter platform that got them there. Janeway is still being wooed by Gath when Harry comes barging in with the news that the Sikaris trajector matrix pad folds space, allowing for travel over vast distances, Alastria being pretty much at the extent of it. Naturally, Janeway asks for help. Could they possibly use this technology to get closer to home? Gath is resolute, though. Sharing technology with outsiders is forbidden. It would break one of the most important of their canon of laws, and there are no exceptions. Act 3. Time for a big senior staff meeting back on Voyager. There's a lot of talk about how the device could save them time getting home, but Tuvok knows it's all just wishful thinking. Janeway puts it into perspective. Asking the Sicarians to violate their law is like an alien culture asking Starfleet to break the Prime Directive. That's tough to hear when the shoe is on the other hand, now isn't it? Maybe the no is a prelude to negotiation, though. Harry's experience with Udana prompts him to propose that stories could be a good bargaining tool. The ship's computer is full of stories, literature from dozens of cultures. It could be a bargaining chip, and Janeway wants to meet with Gath to do this above board. B'Elanna offhandedly remarks that she'll poke around the trajector matrix in the meantime, but the captain says absolutely not. If they're going to do this at all, they will do it above board. Janeway meets with Gath on board Voyager over some pecan pie. If that and her promise of destroying the technology once they use it aren't enough to persuade Gath, then maybe one more thing will. She offers the entirety of their library of literature, centuries worth of stories. That's intriguing, and Gath says he'll bring it up to the other magistrates after finishing his pie. Down in engineering, Seska's mind is wandering. She's thinking about the very possibility of getting home with the use of that trajector matrix. It would allow her to get back to see her brother in time for his birthday, a promise she wants to keep. B'Elanna, determined, goes back to a computer with an idea. The folding of space near Sikaris must leave a subspace residue they can detect. It might allow them to figure out how it works. They detect a heavy neutrino dispersion pattern, and it leads Lieutenant, oh hey, look, it's Lieutenant Nosebreak, also known as Lieutenant Carey, to chime in. He's interested in what interests them. He's thinking of a neutrino bubble big enough to surround the ship, something Seska thinks their modified deflector could do. It's all, in theory, of course, since they don't exactly have authorization to explore this particular path. Also unauthorized is Harry Kim, following Udana to meet with a mysterious Sikaran, Jarrett, who is totally not authorized himself to try to cut a deal for all that tasty literature for a crack at their trajector matrix. He's a bend-the-rules kind of guy. And, if he also happens to be the hero who brings all this new literature to his people, well, nothing wrong with that. Sensing a moral dilemma, Harry gets back to Voyager and confides in Tom Paris and, B'Elanna and Seska, okay. Former inmate Paris is the one who reminds them all that this deal is not above board and tells Harry he needs to report all of this to the captain. When they leave, it's Seska who turns to B'Elanna and says it's up to them now to skirt the rules and get the ship home. Act 4. Jarrett imparted to Harry that Gath has no intention of helping them, which leaves Janeway with her own dilemma now. Try to get help from the guy who has an ulterior motive, Gath, or from the guy who is violating his planet's rules, Jarrett. In private, Tuvok says that the captain must determine Gath's offer, which she does by visiting him on the surface. Gath at first is reluctant, evasive even. Then he makes it clear that he just wants Janeway and the Voyager crew to stay on Sikaris because they're new and novel. Janeway sees his offer for what it is. This pleasure planet is about whatever stimuli can keep the Sikarans amused, and it's not about what their visitors really need. Hurt, angry, full of resolve, Janeway beams back to Voyager and cancels shore leave for everyone. They're leaving. It'll take time to get everyone back, though, and in that time, B'Elanna, Carrie, and Seska have downloaded the entire Federation literary database with plans to trade it to Jarrett. They run off to the transporter room only to be interrupted by Chief of Security Tuvok, who just happens to be walking in to stop them, asks him to prepare the ship, and then beam down to Sikaris to make the exchange with Jarrett himself. Act 5. Moments later, Tuvok walks into engineering with the device and the order to not activate it until he talks to Captain Janeway. When he leaves, though, Seska attaches it to an interface to test it just to be ready. Janeway is ready to leave orbit, but Seska, B'Elanna, and Carrie discover that the trajector matrix only works by using the planet's huge crystalline mantle as a kind of amplifier. They can't leave if their scheme is to work, and so B'Elanna lies about an engine failure to keep them there for a while longer. Then the problem becomes real. As they activate the trajector, the field it opens up is growing super fast, only it's spitting out anti-neutrinos so fast that Voyager's deflector can't keep up. That causes the ship's plasma manifold to become unstable, which means potential warp core breach. It's bad, causing B'Elanna to evacuate engineering and do the only thing she can, destroy the trajector matrix to stop the whole process. Thus ends the emergency, thus ends the way home. This time. Seska says she'll start erasing sensor logs, but B'Elanna stops her. She won't let Seska hide their tracks. Rather, they'll own up to what they did. Time to face the music. B'Elanna explains what happened to Captain Janeway, but Tuvok steps up to admit his role in the whole affair, too. A quietly angry, profoundly disappointed Janeway admonishes B'Elanna for her actions, stating that she can't lose her contribution to the crew, but anything else like this and she won't be an officer any longer. Then it's Tuvok's turn. Janeway's disappointment and utter shock grows. He's her most trusted officer and her friend, and he used logic to justify the wrong course of action. In his defense, Tuvok says he did it to realize her goal, to get the crew home, and spare the captain of the moral dilemma, to which Janeway can only ask him to bring his logic to her and not act on it behind her back. Dismissed, which is Starfleet for get out. The end.
I have to admit something, John. Your recap
Admit it.
Gave me so much pleasure.
Well,
really
as long as it didn't disappoint you, because the last thing that I want to do is, earn the profound disappointment of you or our listeners. Because I would wear that shame for a long, long time.
Next time, though, before you finish your recap, bring your recap to me.
Oh. Dismissed.
And I do love you get points for referencing the dismissed equals Starfleet to forget out.
How could you, nobody could ever forget that now. It's so, man.
That's a t-shirt. That's on a t-shirt.
I tell you what, Janeway just impresses me more and more week after week,
Yeah.
So cool. Okay, let's start off with the moment in the teaser. Who is the unnamed crewwoman in the background behind Kim and Paris? Because, all right, Kim and Paris are sitting at that table, and then you got Siska and B'Elanna, a table or two over, and the camera is from their POV cutting over to Kim and Paris at that table. And there's this background crewwoman there, blonde in a blue uniform. Now, normally you don't have a background player really participating in a scene. You just have them mouthing. It's always, an actor parlance, peas and carrots, peas and carrots. You're just mouthing words in the background, but she's actively listening and then laughing and like gauging their embarrassment. No lines, but it's just such a rarity, and she's so prominent in it. I thought that was very
no credit?
No credit.
In the trivia?
No.
At all?
No, nothing.
No,
nothing.
Just there.
Yeah.
So here's something that I think is very true to life, and maybe it's still true to life in the 24th century, but Harry being tight-lipped when Siska and B'Elanna were trying to wring information from him about his date. Exactly. So did you hear that silence? Because that's what I would actually give you about a date that I was on.
Oh, that's it? Really? Okay.
That's it. That's like, you know what? If I don't tell my parents first, that date didn't happen.
Okay.
And who's he going to tell? He doesn't have anyone to tell.
That's very true. Yeah.
John, are the Delaney sisters getting a bad rap too early?
Yes. I want no shaming of the Delaney sisters, because I think they're awesome, and I think whatever the crew does in their spare time, good for them. They look,
And,
you got 70 years to kill, okay? Yeah.
And I love Tuvok. Whatever's good for the crew, because, he's hip like that. He's concerned. I like that.
This is, I think this is a little foreshadowing. It's just that he will logic his way into anything. Like, hey, Tuvok, is this good for the crew or bad for the crew? Yeah, logic says it's good. Fine.
He has like the logic 8-ball, right? It's either yes, no, logic your way out of it. Those are the three answers.
That's it. Yeah, it's a 3-sided response cube in the 8-ball. All right, look, we have to address it at some point. Might as well be now. The makeup and hair have to be addressed. No facial appliances. Basically, we're talking humans with some ersatz halo thing made out of pipe cleaners sticking out of their buns. That's what we get out of the Sakarans.
It's a real kind of low budget way of putting like the saint halo behind them.
Yeah,
in those medieval paintings.
Yes, right. That's the way it looks. Yeah,
it's very, very weird.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you brought up the way that, say, Tuvok's behavior is foreshadowing, certain events that are going to happen, because I thought that when we first met Gath, it was kind of a throwaway line, but when he said, our people are very well traveled, some of them had brought back stories about the ship of aliens from another part of the galaxy.
Oh, right.
That's foreshadowing.
Yeah.
It's not that they just found Voyager, it's that they were actively seeking Voyager because these stories gave them pleasure.
Very true.
And they wanted to see where these stories came from so that they would be able to receive more pleasure from the actual people in the stories.
That is a nice little bit. You have to think about a story editor, Jerry Taylor or somebody, like going through, reading that draft, seeing how important stories are to the script, and then saying, ooh, what if we plant that idea back at the front? That's very cool. Nice little find.
Very interesting.
Yep.
I'm glad that you also brought up the Beverly Crusher reference from Encounter at Farpoint, because that entire opening in the Sakaran Plaza, it's almost shot exactly the way that we saw her, Beverly, in that scene.
It is. All we're missing is, charge it to my room. That's it, yeah. Now, in that scene, that's also where Harry first meets Udana. And I love their whole thing, like, ooh, can you show me how to operate this? Like, yes, literally wave your hand around this thing. Like, that's it. Like, oh, it's so technical and complicated, But I do have to say, it's nice to see our crew in civilian clothing so early. We did have Planet Candy Corn a few episodes ago, where they had those very, very, early sci-fi kind of Buck Rogers looking outfits. But it's cool to see them with some, even Janeway. She's got some casual clothes, but with her Starfleet logo there. Yeah.
Well, I'm just wondering how she got that civilian clothing on her when Gath has her manhandled literally within 9 minutes.
Yeah, he's very and I get it. It's all part of the character. He's very forward, very, but I kind of wanted a line from Janeway to saying, hey, I have somebody back at home, 70,000 light years away, and he's taking care of my dog. So back off, buddy.
Or even like, you see these 4 pips on my collar?
Yeah.
That means I'm a captain in our world. And you know what that means? That means do not touch me.
Yeah, right.
Or something like that. Very Janeway snappiness.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Of course, we're going to be talking about the Prime Directive here. And I do appreciate, though, that there is a line where Chakotay says when they're in that meeting, he says, I know of many times when Starfleet personnel have decided on strong ethical grounds to ignore it. I'm thinking, I really have to wonder what that class is like at the Academy. How many of these stories of Starfleet personnel ignoring the Prime Directive, how many of those are getting passed around, and how many students come away from it thinking like, wait, they violate this all the time. Why are we learning about this? And I also want to point out in that scene that I love the way that scene is shot, with Janeway looking out the window, and the camera is just craning down, and you have the staff behind her. You're listening to them debating in the background. It's just a great-looking shot. So cool.
And it's not the first time that we see her look towards the stars for some kind of guidance. I always like that about her character. We did that in several episodes. We've made reference to that. And you actually referenced something in Eye of the Needle where you said that Harry and B'Elanna were originally supposed to forge this relationship, which started in Caretaker. Yeah. And we saw another moment like that at around 19 minutes when they were talking about breakfast and they were getting Seska and B'Elanna were ribbing Harry. And then later in this scene, right after Janeway decides what to do, Harry and B'Elanna, again, another poignant scene, another "how are you?" Are you okay? type of scene.
Yeah, there's an intimacy there. It isn't sexual or anything, but it's just this personal intimacy. Like you can see that there is a care there that I really like. I do have to say, I really appreciate that Voyager has just committed to and has dug in with coffee, that this is a thing, this is a hallmark thing for Voyager. And I'm glad to see in this episode, I hope that it comes back again. I haven't watched far enough ahead to really remember if it does or not. Pecan pie. I hope that pecan pie comes back. Those things belong together, coffee and pecan pie. Very excited to see that here.
So I was just wondering, in that scene, do you know, because you're an expert in this field, do you know if that fork was actually supplied by Champion Catering?
Well, it did. It resembled a space fork. So I'm going to say that if it truly is a space fork, hell yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have space fork and then space plate. We had space decanter for the coffee or space thermos.
Yeah.
One thing, though, and I know it's a sore subject for many of us, especially for you and I, especially since the beginning of April. But are we going to have to extend our next Dishin podcast to episode 48? Because now I think we have a little bit of a debate here between how do you pronounce pecan or pecan?
Oh.
Because there's a right way of saying it, and then there's pecan.
Oh, don't. Hey, look, as somebody who is a proud member of the Champion Nut Farm from Southwest Georgia, where we grew and still have to this day many, many acres of pecans. That's what we have. And I will say proudly that my grandmother and mother make a delicious pecan pie. Oh, indeed. By the way, and completely seriously, because that is a true story, even if Dishin is not. I shared it before, and I have to share it here to commit it to the record that is Mission Log. My grandmother did make a great pecan pie from our Champion Nut Farm. That's what we called it, Champion Pecans. My mom made the same exact recipe, but they were always different. And we never told my grandmother why they tasted different, even though they were the same recipe. The difference is my mom put Maker's Mark in it. So that's how that pecan pie gets made, and it is pecan.
All right. Love it. I love that. You know I do.
You got it. So, yeah, look, we do a whole show about pecan pie. I'm so glad it's in this episode.
So I love timestamping this episode because there are very specific moments that just make me cringe. I'm sure they make a lot of the audience cringe, but around the 2042, 2043 mark, Gath places his hand around Janeway's chin.
Yeah.
Okay, so I get that this is his character, but I'm wondering this, and maybe there's somebody out there who has more information, but did Les Landau actually direct Ronald to be so touchy and grabby?
I wondered that, and I also wondered what was Kate thinking during that, because I think about Janeway as slapping down that hand, but I also wonder if Janeway has to think, okay, I have a connection of some sort here. Is this what his culture does? Am I taking this the wrong way or the right way? Is the right way indeed the wrong way? So how much of this do I let go in order to get my goal?
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there, and turn up that creep factor is what's happening there. But I think we're supposed to be put off by it, obviously, because Gath is not to be trusted.
No, it definitely makes you feel uneasy for sure. Yeah.
I do want to point out in engineering the neutrino dispersion pattern. It's one of those things that it is a nice practical effect on set as opposed to one of those overlays we would have done later with blue screen. It also reveals some of the limitations of the time that this episode was shot, but still is an impressive effort at an on-set practical effect. And I really appreciate in this episode the very sincere personal reasons that everybody has to get back home. And it doesn't take a whole lot of dialogue to get it across, but they build believable motivations. I mean, for Seska, for Carrie, and then you can extrapolate that to the rest of the crew. So it's a nice, efficient use of the dialogue there.
So is it me, or is Carrie giving off a real young Chief O'Brien vibe?
Yes, I thought that too, yes.
I mean, even his hair is kind of like Cullum's when Cullum was younger. It just, I don't know, you turn around and he could have been, say, his stand-in if they were doing like a distance shot scene.
Ooh, maybe he was. Maybe I should look that up. But and he's got the wife and kids back home. So
he does?
Yeah, well...
Wait, O'Brien did or Carrie did?
I'm not sure. I may have to look that up, too. Figure out if there's something you can get a character profile. And I do have to ask, wow, the plasma temperature in engineering, 43 million Kelvin. Holy cow, and they're still in the same planetary system with that, and it gets up to 50 million Kelvin. Wow. That is...
Can I ask you a question about that specifically?
Yeah, sure.
Was it as hot in there as it was at the sands on Sakara? Feeling hot.
Nice.
Yeah.
And to wrap it all up, and I think we'll get there again the further we discuss, but man, Janeway's... Look, I didn't do anything, and I still feel like I disappointed Janeway. That's how palpable her disappointment was, and I never want that feeling again.
We've reached a turning point in Star Trek history when the pipe cleaner people doesn't automatically refer to Sylvia and Korob.
We will get right back to Prime Factors, but first a word from this week's sponsors.
So, John, I don't know if you've ever done this, if you've ever walked your dog in public, but this is something that you probably don't want to do. And I'll get to why I'm saying this in a moment. So, if you walk your dog in public, you walk him with a leash, him or her.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
It's the safe thing to do. It's the reliable thing to do. You want to keep you and your dog safe. It's like if you don't use ExpressVPN on the internet, that's like doing the same thing.
Oh, for safety.
For safety, yeah. Because most of the time it'll be fine. You and your dog will be fine. But there's that one day where the dog off the leash does something horribly wrong to somebody or himself.
Yeah. Oh, we don't want that.
Nope.
Yeah. Okay. So I get it. So it's like every time you connect to an unencrypted network, wherever you are. It could be a cafe, a hotel, an airport, whatever. Your online data is not secured like that proverbial dog that is off the leash. So any hacker on the same network could gain access to and steal your personal data. Think about all the stuff on your computer, bank records, passwords, everything else. But along comes ExpressVPN to create a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet so somebody can't see what you're doing and can't get your data.
I mean, it would take a hacker with a supercomputer over 1 billion years to get past ExpressVPN's encryption. It works on all your devices. And imagine this. Imagine pushing that button, ExpressVPN, it's on, you're secure, you're safe. That's how easy it is. It's literally like putting the clasp on your dog's walking collar. That's it. That's all you have to do.
Yeah. And it is so easy. As you just mentioned, it's that one app, push that one button, fire it up, and you are protected. So that's why I use it. I don't even think about it anymore. I just make sure that ExpressVPN is running. And if I'm somewhere, particularly if I'm somewhere in public, because I like to work out of, a coffee shop or a restaurant or wherever, take my iPad with me and just work that way, I absolutely make sure that I am on ExpressVPN because honestly, you turn it on and then you don't think about it again. So get ExpressVPN for yourself, and you can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free at expressvpn.com/missionlog. That's expressvpn.com/missionlog to protect you and your information today.
Got Slack? Got Macs? Get Collide, device security that fixes challenging problems by messaging your users on Slack. Try Collide today. Here's something, John, something that we all should know, everyone out there should know, that Collide sends employees important, timely, and relevant security recommendations for their Linux, Mac, and Windows devices right inside Slack. Right?
I love it. I love it. Right inside Slack.
And Collide is perfect for organizations that care deeply about compliance and security, but don't want to get there by locking down devices to the point where they become unusable. That's not fun at all, especially when you're working with those devices.
Who wants that? Yeah, right? Nobody wants that.
You don't want to frustrate your employees because Collide educates them about security and device management while directing them to fix important problems.
All right, so here's what you can do. Visit collide.com/missionlog today to sign up. That's KOLIDE.com/missionlog. You just put in your email when prompted, and then you will get your free Collide gift bundle after trial activation. So Collide knows that end users are IT admins' most significant untapped resource. And that is the key to solving the most challenging to fix security issues, including things like instructing developers to set passphrases and unencrypted SSH keys, or finding plain text two-factor backup codes and teaching end users how to secure them securely, or convincing employees to uninstall evil browser extensions that may sell their browser history. It's no good for you. It's no good for your employees. It's no good for anybody who's working together. Those are just some of the many use cases not solved by locking down devices.
So you can try Collide with all of its features on an unlimited number of devices for free for 14 days. No credit card required. Try it out at collide.com/missionlog. That's KOLIDE.com/missionlog.
Vulcans, Norman, am I right?
You're right.
I guess
feel
we're
you.
done.
I feel you.
It's like how to logic your way into bad ideas, and sometimes into some good ideas. But man, there's something really interesting about the way this episode just lays it all out on the table and says the quiet part out loud. We've brought this up on Mission Log before, how adherence to a strict set of guidelines, like, say, Vulcan logic, or maybe Klingon honor, pinning everything to just a couple of sort of vague ideas, can simply be used as a justification for whatever bad or good behavior you want. I mean, Sarek could use logic to justify falling in love with Amanda and marrying her. Very, very much out of step for his culture. He could also use logic to justify maybe his poor parenting skills with Spock. It happens. So here we see Tuvok use logic to make a very bad ethical decision. And I got to hand it to him. He wanted the captain and the crew to succeed in getting home. He saw an opportunity, and he thought he could protect Janeway's adherence to her ethical code. And yet, he got it so wrong. And I love, you probably have the same note that I do. I mean, I love Janeway calling him to the mat here, saying, you can use logic to justify almost anything. That's its power and its flaw. Mm-hmm. And how good is Tuvok's response? My logic was not an error, but I was. Man, I kind of get chills from that scene. I really do. Because I feel like it's, decades of Star Trek and our look at the importance of Vulcan influence on humanity and our own, looking at the real world, like our own stress on logic, because it is an important part of our decision making. But yet the acknowledgement that logic can also get you into incredible trouble.
I mean, I love that line. I'd like bookending it with what Spock said to Valeris in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, that logic is the beginning of wisdom, not the end.
Yes.
So is this the beginning of Tuvok understanding that there are so many different ways to be able to defend a position that don't necessarily have logic in terms of it always being the end that justifies the means?
And let's think about something very interesting here about Tuvok. First of all, he is completely Vulcan, so we don't have that interesting duality that we had with Spock. Not to say that Tuvok is not interesting. I think he's very interesting, but that was something specific to Spock, is the duality in him. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that Tuvok is not a young man. Right. We just revealed a couple of episodes ago that he's been married for 67 years. Is what he said in Ex Post Facto, I believe. So he is quite a bit up there. He's had a long time to noodle around how important logic is to him and how to use those tools of logic to bend to what his desired outcome is, but didn't quite pick up that rule from Star Trek VI, or that bit of wisdom from Star Trek VI that Spock is laying on Valeris. I
mean, I like that. With Tuvok's explanation of what he did, he's essentially being able to explain away mutiny. Because mutiny is making the decision on behalf of the captain without the captain's approval or understanding or knowledge. So, and influencing the crew to make that decision as well. So imagine this. Imagine that Carrie and Seska and B'Elanna, everything that they're doing right now is all quote-unquote theoretical, as they say, quote-unquote, on paper, quote-unquote, just in dialogue. Nothing has been done, nothing has been acted on, nothing's been executed. So it's kind of like when you're on trial for something. You can be on trial for the act, but you can't be on trial for the intent specifically per se. So until Tuvok walks in. And Tuvok walks in, and you're like, oh, gosh, we're busted. We're busted by the teacher who knows that he knows like exactly where all the smoking rooms are or where people are hanging out, like trying to like sneak drinks during lunch or whatever. And all of a sudden, he's the guy that lights up the cigarette in front of you and said, okay, you guys can go. I'll cover you.
Right.
And then what are you left behind with? You're like, was this okay? Are we okay with this? Because Tuvok walks in, Janeway's most trusted friend and officer on this ship, the person that she went to the Badlands for. Right? And all of a sudden, he's okay with explaining away mutiny because of logic.
I have to wonder, what does that do to somebody like B'Elanna, who they very cleverly in this episode let you, the audience, see her as wrestling with these ideas. How, at every moment she's getting swayed one direction or the other. Like, I know that this isn't totally right. I know what the captain said to me, but I know what Seska's saying to me, and I know what Carrie is feeling. So I love that you get a lot of that without her explicitly stating it. Then you have to go, okay, when a guy like Tuvok walks into the room with all of his gravitas and his importance, what does this do to her? Either swaying her more toward this unethical act, or after the act is done, more toward the responsibility that it carries with it.
Right. And even more so, not too long ago, she had his complete confidence, or his confidence in her, both being Maquis at one point in time.
True. Yeah.
So
very
does
true.
she follow his lead saying, oh, I know what this guy's capable of, because of, the illusion that he put on of being on her side at one point in time? That has to be confusing in some stretch.
Let me ask you this. Is this, in Tuvok's mind, maybe a needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one?
Let's put a pin in that.
Okay.
Let's put a very specific pin in that.
Okay. We will put a pin in that.
Yeah.
The other thing here that, and there are many aspects to pick apart in this episode, but something that I think is just front and center and incredibly important to this episode is the idea of staying true to the principle behind the rule. And that's it is in direct contrast to Tuvok just saying, okay, here is the thing we want to accomplish, therefore we will bend whatever logical precept we can to get there. Janeway's stated concern from the outset of the series is that her crew would act as a Starfleet crew no matter what. Cut to Seska. I'll start erasing the sensor logs. B'Elanna saying, no, we're not going to cover this up. And Seska saying, are you crazy? We don't have to take the blame for this. To which B'Elanna replies, but we're going to. And it has to do with being able to live for yourself. I love that exchange so much.
Yeah.
And look, I'm not saying that any one of us hosting this show or listening to this show has always ever lived up to that, but it is so nice to see our characters on screen living that moment out because of what just happened, and actually just saying explicitly to each other and to the audience then, no, we did the wrong thing. Therefore, now that we've done the wrong thing, we actually have to do the right thing, which is to stand up and take our punishment, or whatever is going to come from that. I think it is such a pivotal scene in contrast to maybe some things that we've seen before that take a different path, a different approach.
I like that Carrie's brought into this equation, because you have Seska, who is clearly still Maquis and thinks Maquis. Then you have Carrie, who is Federation, but because of his family situation at home, he wants to make this decision based on, getting back to his family, his loved ones. And then you have B'Elanna kind of like in the middle. Yeah. And it's a really wonderful arc where she's come from, say, in Caretaker, where she kind of like looks at Chakotay and says, who does she think she is? Answering for all of us. And then Chakotay says she's the captain. And I think this is where we are with B'Elanna. You had a really great moment there in Caretaker. You had another great moment with B'Elanna winning the captain's trust in Parallax, and then now losing the captain's trust in a way, but understanding that this was the wrong thing to do, and you have to be able to rectify it by owning up and re-earning that captain's trust, or her captain's trust, with being responsible. The responsibility is still there. I think that it was just really a pleasure to watch unfold. The interesting thing in all of this, though, is how are you shaving the ability to weave the prime directive in and out of this equation, just skirting the boundaries of what is and what isn't applicable when it comes to being able to fulfill one of the other promises. Are you going to get home, or are you going to hold up the principles?
Yeah.
That's the way that I think a lot of people live their lives. They struggle in these very micromanaging moments of their own personality and say, well, if I just do this, then this will happen, and I'm okay with that. And again, going back to Tuvok, that's just logicking yourself out of the problem.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And this is one of the few exceptions recently where you've really just looked at the prime directive, just sort of exposed the prime directive, and I think in a really genius way allowed us to look at the other side of it. I mean, they pretty much spell it out for you, and they're saying, okay, it's the prime directive, but guess what? We're on the opposite side of it now, so how do we feel? Which is... It is one of those ways of challenging the audience to say, okay, you're all on the same page with us about what's important. We already know that because you've been watching Star Trek for however long, but as long as we keep saying that these principles are important, how far can we actually bend them when we're the ones who, stand to benefit the most from bending that principle? And when that principle, or when that benefit is so huge, which is the ultimate goal of this crew, just to get home, which we can all appreciate and we can all understand, how much are we willing to compromise? And I think very cleverly they show that some of these individual crew members are willing to compromise more than others, but more importantly, as a crew, as a singular unit, as a crew, they get slammed back into place to say, like, no, wait, the principle is actually more important than any individual desired outcome.
Here's something that is a smaller point in the background, but I thought it was really interesting when it came to, I can see this being applied all the way back to the original series. Is there such a thing as pure altruism? Think about what Gath was promising Janeway and Voyager. Please come to our planet. All we want to do is offer you pleasure. In any way, shape, or form, whether it's food, whether it's entertainment, whether it's luxury, and we want nothing in return until they do.
Right.
Until they do. That brings up a really interesting concept of seeing something like that. Say, they're almost like the Talosians in a way, and their cage is far wider.
Yeah.
Their ability to, their leash is far longer, I should say, because they're allowing humanity, i.e. Voyager, to be able to provide them with the information that the Talosians say wanted behind the cage, in that stimuli, that, that stress that Pike was under and Vina was under. But all of a sudden, now Gath's like, entertain us however you want, but we're going to provide you the stimuli for that entertainment until we don't.
Which, for that matter, this could have gone a very different direction. It could have been a first contact moment where you say, like, oh, okay, look, we can come back. If we have this technology, we could send other Federation ships back. You can be part of the Federation. You can have all the outside cultural exchange that you want, all the stories that you want. But, the Gath's motives, at least, are something very different. They're much more petty and personal in that respect. It's just about whatever he gets out at the moment. I think to address your bigger question, though, is there anything such as pure altruism? I think not necessarily so, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. In this case, it is being abused. But altruistic behaviors that benefit both parties, the giver and the recipient, can be okay, because ultimately you're sort of compounding these actions that then could benefit more people. It's okay if the one who is being altruistic is also benefited, as long as that continues as a cycle, that those who receive, those who are lifted up by that altruism, continue it on. I don't think it's entirely wrong. Except when it is abused, as it clearly is here. We're not necessarily abused. It's just a selfish, sort of a myopic, selfish gain.
I mean, the big question for me is, and for you, John, and for the audience out there, when we're watching a concept like this, and the reason why I like bringing it back to, like, say, the 1960s science fiction type of application of this concept, are we conditioned to a point as humanity to be able to watch this and accept it, or watch it react to the, say, like the capitalist motivations that have programmed humanity to react to, like, no, this is impossible. There's no way that something like this would exist. And say, like in Deep Space Nine's application of this would be, what Quark would say. He would say that everyone has their price, and he's proven that time and time again. So it's just an interesting concept, but it's very hard to try and digest from a real world standpoint because of the way the conditioning has been able to program our holographic brains. I mean, our actual human brains. Sorry.
So these people are good with any story? Any story at all? Finally, I know where I'm sending my Baywatch Nights box set.
All right. Well, we have just taken a little bit of time to tell you a story. Yes, it's our gift to you our most precious resource, a story that we lifted out of Voyager's first season and got to discuss its morals, meanings, and messages. And now we've arrived at the end of that story, where we're going to give you a wrap-up, tell you what we thought of it, what we learned maybe from today's episode. Norman, I hope that we both learned something beyond what, Gath learned, because I feel like you didn't learn anything. I feel like there are other people who did learn a thing or two, like B'Elanna and maybe Seska and hopefully Carrie and, definitely Tuvok. So if you would honor me with filling in the rest of the story with how you feel like this episode held up.
This may come as a surprise, given the nature of my tone throughout the course of kind of like our recap and our observations, etc. But it's a yes for me. I really actually did like this episode quite a bit, for the most part, because I think that it just gives us another glimpse into what's happening beyond kind of like the captain's understanding, beyond the captain's purview with the crew in Voyager. I think that there's like a lot of really good representation with a lot of the main bridge crew characters. Harry gets another great bit here. Tuvok obviously is fantastic in this episode. We have some really good, return characters like Carrie that comes back, which is really, really nice. But for me, though, I'm really interested now in Seska, because Martha Hackett really flexes really, really well as Seska in this episode. It's kind of an interesting way that she's maneuvering herself throughout certain alliances that she's making in the crew. She's still very loyal to the Maquis. She's, loyal to B'Elanna in a way, but she also seems to be very, Lady Macbethian, because she's starting to push certain buttons in certain people, and she knows what buttons to push. Mm-hmm. She knows what motivations rise to the top with people, and I think it's very interesting to watch her act, both Seska and Martha. But here's my biggest problem with the episode.
Okay.
It's casting, especially one particular person who ends up being kind of like the lead protagonist alien, which is Ronald Gutman as Gath. Now, he's either the perfect casting decision for Gath, or perhaps the worst casting decision I've ever seen in Star Trek, and I still can't make up my mind as to which.
Interesting. Okay.
He's just on the knife's edge of making your skin crawl in every scene, particularly when he gets very handy and grabby with Janeway.
Yeah.
And maybe the actor, with no disrespect, again, this is just my interpretation of this character, maybe he just didn't have the ability or the nuance or the direction from, say, Les Landau to give Gath just a little bit more sinister guile, a little bit more subterfuge, a little bit more sensuality or seduction, where he needed to be a softer hand, a more velvet glove with Janeway in order to have her on the line, in that seductive kind of way. He just seemed to be a little too forceful and forward, and not nearly like operating in, say, the way that, I don't know, I don't want to say stronger actor, because I think he actually is a strong actor, but just in a way that I say Gath needed to be. And that's just, again, that colors a lot of the negative opinion that I have of this episode, but overall, I really did like it. How about you?
I wonder if your feeling about that is because he's not alien enough. There's a problem here where you just see the actor. They look human,
Sure.
And because of that, he feels just more like a guy who's stayed too long at the bar one night, and it's just a little too forward, a little too grabby, a little, so it doesn't... It just rings. It's almost a little too uncanny valley, you know?
Yeah.
So there's something weird about that where they didn't decide to go full on with one decision or another. What is this guy going to be? Is he going to be a bad guy, or is he going to be a little easier to swallow as like kind but kind of seductive? It never quite lands. I maybe that's what it is.
Uncanny Valley, that's a great way of putting it, because I can't really articulate exactly why. I just know that there's something about it that I don't like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, the problem with this episode, and there are a few, we're back where we were a few weeks ago with that dangling promise that gets pulled out from under our crew at the last minute. I describe that as the Gilligan's Island problem. And I know that will have to be a plot point for any number of episodes. Mostly I'm okay with that, but you can also see it coming. Like, here's the one device that'll fix our problem. Oh, but we can't actually use that because then we don't have a show. The other thing is that the attention on this episode feels a little divided in that we're possibly supposed to pick up something about this planet of hedonistic pleasure seekers, but it's not really explored that well. They just sort of are, and there's not much of a statement being made there. And even Janeway's, there's this one scene that I think is very easy to overlook. Janeway's explanation to Gath about what makes humans different, that sense of home and the importance of deepening relationships. That scene just kind of falls flat because it feels like the episode isn't really about that. So we're just trying to squeeze something else in. And then there's the problem of the production design. It is a shopping mall planet and aliens with pipe cleaners in their hair. It feels like the budget got cut. Yeah. And I'm sure that's what happened. A few weeks ago, we joked about Neelix's lungs being a parallel to Spock's brain because, well, specifically you had a stolen organ plot, but you also had the balance of a story with a weird premise that might be hard to swallow, but with a lot of good ideas in there too. Fast forward to where we are today with Prime Factors, and it is an episode that actually tackles the challenges of the Prime Directive head on in a way that only Voyager can do, given its very unique premise. We have a moral, ethical dilemma that puts the captain in the role of the chief decision maker and in a position to defend the importance of her and Starfleet's values, and it's all out there in the open for everyone to see. There's no hiding tracks. There's no lying about what happened. There's just a crew who made a series of bad decisions based on reasonable motivations, and it came back to bite them. So seeing Janeway deal with that and the personal disappointment, it elevates the story to a far higher place than we might expect it to at first glance if all you're seeing is, the budget cut. So when we asked, does it hold up, this is one of those occasions where the production values fall flat. The guest star is questionable, or at least made questionable choices, or is directed in a questionable way. But the heart of this story is so absolutely perfectly Star Trek that I cannot help but defend it. It does hold up in the respect that Mission Log's mission is to explore morals, meanings, and messages, and this episode runs headlong into one of the most important of them. So, messages. What did you get?
Yeah, this is one of those episodes that I think that had another similar problem, say with Emanations or other episodes we've mentioned before, where they almost have too many really good ideas and they don't really figure out which one is going to be the one that's going to kind of be the alpha idea. But when you really boil this down, this episode really kind of crystallizes at the very end where you're dealing with priorities versus principles. This is something that I think is very Star Trek. And remember when I said early on in our observations, to put a pin in what you said, the needs of the many versus the needs of the few?
Yeah.
This is pretty amazing stuff, folks, because, John and I, again, rarely see our notes when we create these for the podcast. And my notes specifically for morals, meanings, and messages reference this very axiom. So what we have here, in my opinion, what is on display and in conflict, you have the needs of the many and the needs of the few equaling the Voyager crew, and specifically B'Elanna, Seska, and Carey on one side of the equation. You have versus the needs of the one, which is Janeway, on the other side of the equation. Now, Seska says to B'Elanna that the main responsibility for everyone on the ship is to try and find a way home. Captain Janeway made that clear from the beginning. That's our primary mission. No argument there. That, like you said, John, this is out in the open. This is something that Captain Janeway believes. Yeah. But then Janeway says to Tuvok, principles principles. That's what it comes down to. Do I compromise my almighty principles? They're not her almighty principles. They're Starfleet's almighty principles in this point. But how do I not compromise them if it involves a chance to get the crew more than halfway home? How do I tell them my principles are so important that I would deny them that opportunity? Now, here's the interesting thing. Here's the wrinkle in this whole equation.
Okay.
Tuvok gives her the out with logic. Mm-hmm. He literally gives her the out because he said that you aren't dealing with your problem. You're dealing with someone who's already compromised his own set of laws. Mm. That's not your fault. That's his fault. So you're operating under doing the right thing for the crew under the auspices of this other person's compromise.
Yeah.
Does that still hold up to compromising her principles? I think that's a very interesting way of looking at it, because this is when her principles do outweigh her priorities.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, I don't know about for you, John, but for me, I think I would have sided with B'Elanna if I was there in engineering. Were they going against the captain's orders? Yes.
Yeah.
But they were also acting under the pretense that the captain promised to get them home, and they had the ability to do so in their hand.
Yeah.
So does following the letter of the law, does that outweigh the instinct to do what's right? Again, it's principles versus priorities. I don't have the answer. I know the moral meaning and message in this episode. I don't necessarily agree or disagree with either choice in this matter, which makes it so unbelievably Star Trek.
Well, I think that's what's so good about what you're pointing out is that you, like you just said, you can fully understand. You can even say, like, yeah, I would side with B'Elanna. Here, you're handed this gift. You have this thing that somebody else broke their principles to get you. Now, all you have to do is turn it on. That person breaking their principles, that's not you. That's not your fault. All you have to do is turn it on to get you there. But I think what's more important is when we get to the end, that B'Elanna is the one who stands up. Tuvok is the one who stands up. I would like to see that same encounter with Carrie and Seska when they have to face Janeway, you know.
Right.
But that would be a lot of scenes, you know, back to back. You can fully understand and align with that motivation. You can also fully understand and align with what has to happen afterward. So there's not a singular right answer there other than to say, okay, well, when things do go wrong, we then have to live up to the principle of being who we say we are and understanding what was and what is at stake here.
One last thing, John, before you get into your morals, meanings, and messages, just think about it this way. In Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, the choice that Kirk could not make was made by Spock, his best friend and Vulcan.
Yeah.
The choice in this episode that Janeway couldn't make was done by her best friend and Vulcan.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting parallel, I think.
That's nice. That's nice. Well, look, there's one topic that we really didn't touch on, and I think it's another fascinating part of the episode, is Yadana says to Harry Kim, noble stories are the ones that can most affect our lives. And, you know, to Harry, he describes it as saying, you know, that stories are more than entertainment. They're sort of a measuring rod of values and beliefs. And this episode isn't really about that, but I like that line, both of those lines, so much, because it's honestly why we do Mission Log. And it's why we're so interested in the stories that Star Trek has to tell. We could be talking about any other number of shows on a podcast, but we're talking about a show that specifically waves to the audience and says, here's a story that has value. Here's a story that actually, you know, noble might not always be the right word, but here's a story that can actually impact lives and outlooks and make the audience think. That was what Gene Roddenberry always wanted. Hey, we're going to tell you something that can be fun and, you know, tell you a good yarn, a good action-adventure story, but at the end of the day, it can also make you think. So I love that moment of the emphasis of the importance of the story itself. because that's what we're doing here. That's why this podcast exists. Now, as to the principle, this is the moral meaning message of the episode, I think, it comes down to something that should be pretty obvious, and that is that your code is only worthy if you live by it when nobody else is looking. Janeway, the Voyager crew, they don't have to answer to anybody. There is no Starfleet, there is no Federation out there breathing down their necks looking at everything that they do. Voyager's crew had every opportunity here to either strong-arm their way into getting what they wanted, or there were plenty of opportunities to bend a rule or to overlook an inconvenient barrier. And I don't know why this is still so hard for some people to grasp. But if the principles that you say you value only apply when it's easy, then they really aren't your values at all. They're built on a foundation of sand. And this is the perfect Star Trek way of reminding us that sometimes, maybe most of the time, that the right thing to do is going to be the hardest thing to do. We'll get it wrong and we'll make mistakes, but we have to rely on the people around us to keep ourselves in check, to live honestly, and to make every effort to live our principles, not just give them lip service.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you would like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, State of Flux.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers Adam Brusky, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, John Mann, Mike Richards, and Mike Schabel. Dear Planet of the Pleasure people, Buck Rogers called and it wants you back. Say hi to Tweaky for me. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.